Okay.
Hey, Lee. How are you?
My evening. Before the meeting starts, I get to say hi. It's all downhill from there. All right, getting there.
Evening, Chris. How are you?
Hey, I'm well, thanks. Terry, how you doing?
Doing good. Doing good, considering.
Um,
Would it be okay if I turned off my video until you're ready for us? I think we're pretty late down on the agenda, so,
no problem.
Yeah, that's okay.
okay, thanks.
All right, it's 7. Everybody hear me okay? We're going to start up. We have a long and rich agenda tonight. So I'm going to do this. I looked at it. I thought about taking things off. I thought about flipping the order. I'm not going to do either. I'm going to limit everybody except item 4 to 10 minutes. And we can go longer, but you're just going to hear me pushing us to move forward, right? So I'm going to try to find ways of getting to a policy conclusion or getting to a stopping point and an agreement on next steps, okay? Notice the change of public meeting. Yeah. Okay. But before we start, I think I have some item 0 that Amber's going to handle. Is that right?
Yeah, Anthony, we just wanted to wish you well in your new endeavors. It's your last meeting with us, which is a super long one. So we just really wanted to give that gift to you and just some small things so that you can keep Beacon in your heart as you move on to your next great success. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Normally I have things to say, right? I'm touched and I'm speechless. Thank you. I just also, I guess, Mayor, I can do this at the end. I just wanted to thank everybody also. I wanted to thank the council and you, Mayor. I mean, this has been, I've been at this job for 23 years and I got to tell you, I mean, what we went through in March and April and, was something, and I'm proud of what we did. I'm proud of this city. And I think the public needs to be proud of not only the council, but its workforce, right? We get a lot done with a small amount of people, right? So sometimes I think we get calls and requests, and I don't think they realize just how few people are here in this building, in our workforce, right? And that's good, right? We're good at what we do. This is a great little city and you guys have taken me in and, I know I just live over in Fishkill, right? We can't say that word. But, I appreciate the support and I appreciate that again, I can't, I joke, right? I can't do this job without you and without the workforce. I can tell them what to do, but, they get it done, right? And even working with the council, just taking my advice, I appreciate it. And again, as I said, Mayor, I think what we went through with the pandemic, will be with me for a while. So I want to thank everybody and thank you.
Yeah, there is something unique about the last year. So starting about March and then, not to just have one crisis, a health crisis, and then to have an economic one that comes from that, and then to have a civil rights one that follows that, just for, to add to the work to be done. So it was a long and hard year. I'm trying to think of times where I have developed a stronger bond with someone that I've worked with. And there are some times when I've done things. My college friends that I did campaigns with are still my friends. I was on a Zoom call with them this weekend. Some of my friends from grad school, law school, but it's usually, things that try you and put you in a intense position. And certainly that was the case this year. And I am ever grateful. So.
I am too. And I should say to right, both the council and the public, right, we're dealing with those issues that you mentioned. And then there'll be times you'll be like, okay, but what about, can we accept credit cards? And I'm like, what, are you kidding me? I was like, can we wait a week on that one? But thank you, everybody. I appreciate it.
Amber, can you give us a sense of maybe what kind of things are in the goodie bag? Or?
Oh, just there's a lovely Beacon tote bag, some coffee from Bank Square, the No Sleep Till Beacon coffee, and even though we have never seen you wear a t-shirt, we got you a Beacon t-shirt. So hopefully you will wear that well.
Okay.
Isn't there also something for dinner?
Yes, and of course we want you to come back and enjoy a meal in our city at some point. So a gift card to a place that you like. So
Thank you.
thanks, Anthony, for everything.
Thank you, everybody.
All right, so this is the most important item of the meeting. We can call it an evening if you want, or we can keep going and torture the guy for the rest of the night.
No, let's torch me to the end.
There we go. All right, but I wanted to do that first. I didn't want to wait till the last.
Thank you, thank you.
We're going to stay in order if we can. So there's one on Police Reform Planning Committee. That's Mark Unger and Pastor Perez. Can I ask that you just do a summary of where you're heading? Because I don't think that we're going to give you any direction that you don't already have, but give us a quick summary if you could.
Sure. I will defer first to Mr. Unger.
Yeah, we'll both contribute, but basically we had our first meeting last Wednesday, and it's a really good group of people with a diverse backgrounds and interests, bringing in different contributions about criminal justice, youth, different aspects of public safety. And we are asking them to send specific contributions on scaffolding that we created around the proposal of different issue areas, community safety, diversity in hiring, youth, social issues, how to deal with that, to bring in perspectives and to come to very specific, actionable, affordable programs that we can pursue. And that combines with what the city is already doing, services that are provided by the state and the county, so that we don't duplicate and that we take advantage of what's already there. So by Wednesday's meeting, I think we're going to have a very strong foundation, which will then lead to a very workable document for the city council and the government by February 12th.
All right, I'll pick up from here. So yeah, so we did get a good core group, and so I had spent a good portion of my summer and into November working with the county on their police reform. So if many of you have seen it, there was a 102-page document that I had the pleasure of actually reading more than once and actually trying to digest and understand it, and then be able to now give it back to the city in a format that we could understand. And there was a lot of topics in there. I think we've had 5. I think we're up to 6 that we're going to actually be able to decipher. And I think that the group is really, it gives us an opportunity to hear from the community. We also were able to get city people. I mean, we got the DA, we've got a couple others on there that will help us really formulate this plan. And it's all about getting the deliverables to you and then being able to deliver it at the end to the by April 1st. And I believe that based on the work that's already been done, plus a lot of information from Beacon, I think that Mark had collected back in August, compiling both of those and really coming up with a comprehensive document that reflects Beacon. But the city did, the county did do a lot of the work for us. So I'm really proud of the document we did. If you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it. We put a lot of hard work to it. And it really was a labor of, I will say, love on this one, because it was a lot of work. And I believe at the end of it, we will all be proud of the document that we produced for the city of Beacon as well.
And I would just add very briefly, the PBA is sending out a questionnaire to all of the Beacon Police Department officers. We had a really good conversation with Officer Confield about that in terms of understanding where the officers come from, their experiences, their ideas, their recommendations. And today, Chief Frost sent a really elaborate response about hiring, sector policing, because a lot of this process is educating the community, because a lot of people don't know how are officers hired, why can't we have a 24-hour walking police officer on Main Street? The restrictions of budgets and personnel is a two-way street for all of us to understand. So we're really looking forward to getting the input of all the police officers. And I think we're developing a really good working relationship with everyone in the police department.
Mayor's on mute.
Oh, Mayor, I think you're on mute, Mayor.
The only thing I'll add when I'm not on mute are thank you, gentlemen, for your leadership. I've spoken to both of you. One, we've got you a writing resource, so we just want you to stay focused on recommendations. And list, and we'll figure out how to build it around it. Give us some direction as to not just recommendations, but also where you think the other components are, but just make it managerial direction. We'll get you help, right? It's not your job to craft the sentences. And Eleanor Peck is, we're gonna devote some of her hours to this, and I think that will be useful. The other one is, that the other advice I've given you is provide a complete document. You're not going to have time to provide it in detail, so provide it up in a higher level of generality. It's okay. And reserve in that generality the implementation and execution process, as opposed to all of the details of exactly what we'll do when, right? Because when you do that, you will start to also say that the implementation project is part of the important process of moving forward, and will give you the ability to finish the project in a time frame that delivers the deadline for the executive order, but also sets us up to move forward. And I very much appreciate it. I know, Mark, you do that for a living. You know how to kind of play with the level of generality to kind of fit deadlines, and we'll get to the next round and the next round, and we'll flesh it out in detail. We'll get there. Okay.
We appreciate all the guidance and leadership, and I think we're on course for a very productive document.
Yep, I listened to your first meeting, and I thought you were great. You do such a good job of listening. I get impatient and just want to get to the answer, and you're really good about making sure people are heard and building that into the.
Mayor, we can change jobs. I mean, I have no choice but to be a good listener in my job. So it's a trait that I've had to develop. Because remember, you say herding cats, I say herding sheep. So, but I think the most important thing that we have to remember about this document is the deliverables. It's one of the things we talked about the county, and it's great to put a pretty document together, but if we don't follow through with it, then we just wasted everybody's time. So I think that what we're looking to do is give everyone something that we can really achieve, both short-term and long-term, and then be able to, really have the community kind of circle around this project so that we all feel comfortable with what we've put together.
Okay, great. Any comments from council?
Got a question. The question that I raised last week was how this committee's work intersects with that table of that things to do list that we had for the council.
So it should, let's make sure, Colin, that they get a copy of that. They've gotten our resolution, but they may not have gotten that because I didn't send it to them. So let's make sure they get that as well. We sort of laid out an agenda that Dan is referring to and started chipping away at things. It's actually a pretty good list. And yeah, take a look at that. I believe your buckets cover them, but make sure that your buckets cover our resolution that we actually passed, as well as our to-do list that Dan refers to.
That would be great.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you brought that up, Dan, Councilman Dan, because we didn't even know it existed. So it's good that we have another resource, because we've been getting a lot of the other municipality resources as well as, City of Newburgh, City of Middletown, the county. So we've been trying to really, look at all of them and see what really fits for our city as compared to everybody else's. So thank you so much.
Right. And then, so it sounds like the conversation that would have been had about some of the items on that table, where we would have had them in this venue in the public, does that mean that those conversations will now take place during the committee mostly? And if so, can your meetings be televised like other board meetings, like zoning board or planning board?
So probably not. So in talking to the Jackie and Lance from our attorneys, right? These are really not public meetings. They're more internal meetings, but the document itself has to be approved and reviewed by the council. And I don't know if it's a public hearing, but there needs to be public input. So then that document will have the public input portion of it. So here, the committee is going to be doing its work, and then it's going to be brought to the council. And I think there needs to be a public hearing on that, going from my memory. And then that's when the public input and the council will review it. But right now, they're not open for the public, these current committee meetings.
I think, Anthony, you're describing the current group delivering the April 1st deadline document.
Yes, I'm sorry. Did I misunderstand? If I did, I apologize.
That's what I was thinking of.
All right, so that part, yes, the way you've described it. But after that, in terms of implementation, there may be some recommendations that an ad hoc committee continue, that an advisory committee get put together, and that may have more formal elements to it that would make it more public. And we should figure how to do that in a way that keeps everything very public and very community, willing to receive community input.
And even if there were things, outside of the scope, right, that the council wants to look and review too. So that doesn't preclude that from, those conversations.
And I think, Dan, you raised a really good point. It could be too that we get to see a version of it and say, these three we'd like to pick up, and they involve legal change, so let us pick them up. These others, we'll let run forward, and that'll depend on what the recommendations look like. Right.
Just as a brief schedule outline, we plan to finish February 12th, send it to you, the city council and the city, because you'll have a lot of legal comments, and this is what we can't do, what we can do, what we are doing. And then hopefully as soon as possible, get it to the public. So you'll have a good chance, as long as you need, to review it for necessary additions and recommendations before it goes to the public.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to ensure that as much of the conversation was happening in public as possible. That's all. Have members of this committee been selected yet?
They have. We'll put out a list tomorrow. We should have had it out, but I just didn't get to it. So, but I think we've got a list going. And I think that two of you kind of agreed on that group, right? Meaning Mark and John.
Yes, sir.
And if members of the public would like to contact this committee, what's the best way for them to do it?
Call Colin.
So that would be City of Beacon at cityofbeacon.org. Is that what it is?
Yeah, it would probably, yeah.
Sorry, the phone number, excuse me, sorry, this is Colin Malone in the mayor's office. The phone number is 845-838-5010. And the email is cityofbeacon@cityofbeacon.org. It's simple and redundant, so hopefully not forgettable.
And will this committee be having specific input opportunities? Like, will you be seeking input at any specific times or on any specific questions, or should people just contact you if they have any thoughts at any time?
So right now we're set up to just really deal with the 5 topics within the 10 or 15 people that we've got there, so that it's really that, and then really, as Mayor said, craft the document, get it to you, and then it's going to be more open to how the council will then, how the city council will then bring in the community for feedback once the document is out for review.
I'm somewhat playing devil's advocate here.
Yeah, and I'm trying to not be the devil and give you the advocate response. Yes.
I mean, we're also getting, just by the nature of things, messages. Brooke Simmons and I, Beacon Now, a Gmail that people know, and sending me things. So I'm putting them into a working document. So I'm fine with getting comments whenever, but I respond. This is to people. This is a process, and it will be open formally in mid-February.
And I guess maybe just to clarify my understanding, and also for the public, I forget when we talked about this briefly, but this is all in order to adhere to the governor's executive order that each city or community provide some kind of analysis of their policing and areas for improvement. I don't have the executive order in front of me, but I'm sure there's more to it. But this is the step of that process to kind of create the formal documentation that's needed for the state, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yep.
And like the mayor was just, I think, referring to, this will not be the sum total of what the city will be doing in reference to police reform. So we may be doing, for instance, additional legislative actions or budget items or policies in addition to what this committee does in terms of the formal response to Executive Order 203. So this is one step and part of the larger process.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that is my understanding as well. There's a lot of pieces to this puzzle. This is some of the documentation required by the state, and certainly there will be ongoing efforts around all of this.
But a very important part. So thank you.
Yes.
And the whole process that the county had put together was to that fact it would try to minimize the amount of work that the cities and the municipalities would have to do, and giving you a baseline and kind of a foundational to go with, and then add or delete from there. So that was really the whole premise around getting the county to do it, a lot of the legwork, and then bringing it down to the municipality level, and then being able to there pick out which ones we wanted to do. So it would be able to get us to that point of April 1st sooner than later.
Okay. Thank you. And more to come, obviously. All right.
Thank you.
And you're going to see me push things along because it's a long agenda and a very rich one. So thank you. So Tom Wright, Mark Price, Beacon Hudson River Trail. So try to keep it under 10 and just stay focused on that one trail, right? That'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Lee. Colin said I might be able to share screen. Is that still on the table?
Yep, you should be good to go.
Good evening. My name is Thomas Wright. I'm the chair of the Beacon Greenway Trail Committee. On behalf of the committee, I would like to thank Mayor Lee Kyriakou and the Beacon City Council for the opportunity to present to you this evening. I had intended to report on 2 segments, but if I'm clear, and I can keep it under 10 minutes, I had intended to, proceed.
Yeah, do both. Thank you.
This is an exciting time for trails in Beacon. As people flock to the Hudson Valley, more and more of them are discovering that Beacon's walkability extends to a large and increasingly interconnected network of trails. Trails that expand our awareness of the natural beauty that surrounds us and connects us to communities around us. We are closer than ever to reap the rewards of planning and work that began over a decade ago, when we conceived of a continuous trail along the banks of Fishkill Creek from the train station to the Fishkill Town Line. As an example, 2 key segments of the Fishkill Creek Greenway and Heritage Trail will soon emerge as part of the development that is underway at 248 Tyrona Avenue. And just across Wolcott Avenue at 2328 Creek Drive, the former DPW yard. In the action plan that the committee presented to the council in June 2020, we outlined the remaining challenges for the trail, as well as several other trail-related initiatives that we feel will greatly enhance the walking and hiking experience for Beacon citizens and its visitors. One of these initiatives is the Beacon Hudson River Trail. For those of you who aren't familiar with it, the BHRT is a proposed trail that will one day link the pedestrian path of the Newburgh Beacon Bridge with the MTA Beacon train station. In addition to the practical benefits of a walking and biking link between Newburgh and Beacon, the trail passes through a very scenic wooded area and affords dramatic views of the river and the bridge overhead. In 2014, the Beacon Greenway Trail Committee helped secure matching grant funds from the Hudson River Valley Greenway Conservancy to fund a master planning process led by Dan Biggs of Weston and Sampson, with insight and review from committee members. That plan was presented to the City Council in March of 2017. In December of 2017, the city again successfully applied for grant through the Conservancy to prepare preliminary design plans for a pathway and related structures for the trail. It is the result of these efforts that I'm presenting this evening. The plan drawings and design report provide siting and layout for the trail as it winds its way down from the elevation of the bridge path to a scenic bluff overlooking the river, along the MTA rail line to emerge at West Main Street, just a few steps from the Beacon train station. Key aspects of the design are as follows. 1, switchbacks and retaining walls required to navigate the drop in topography between the bridge and the bluff just above the rail line. 2, a future connection to residential communities in the town of Fishkill on the other side of the bridge. Permissions, cameras, and security fencing are required by the Bridge Authority, which are outlined in detail in the report. 3, a viewing plaza at the bluff will provide a unique view of the Hudson bracketed by the dramatic bridge structure above. 4, an elevated portion of the trail, which navigates the rapid change in topography between the bluff and the MTA rail line. 5, fencing locations and specifications as required by the MTA to keep trail users from Metro North train service. The design report and plans describe the proposed trail in a way that makes the project real. It analyzes the site, describes the challenges, and proposes solutions to these challenges. It provides enough information to generate preliminary budget study, which Mr. Biggs has provided. The committee has reviewed and approved the final draft of the design report, which is available through the link in this evening's agenda, and we encourage the council to provide its approval as well. In the spirit of keeping the momentum going, applying for another Greenway grant is a logical next step, and the committee encourages this. The design report notes on page 18 that, quote, upon approval of the preliminary design documents, the construction documents, including contract drawings and specifications, shall be prepared for bidding, end quote. However, given the costs and time frame associated with a project of this scale, the committee would like to propose a phased yet parallel effort. Page 17 of the design report states, quote, as a first phase, it would be beneficial to establish an informal soft surface trail alignment, set up access easements and agreements with property owners, and therefore enable access for interested trail users, end quote. The committee feels that this initial phase can begin immediately, even as grant funds are sought for final construction documents. An initial phase would focus on the portion of the trail between the pedestrian path at the bridge and the viewing plaza at the bluff along the rail line. This would leave the portion of the trail along the rail line inaccessible and off limits for the time being. This initial phase would include securing trail easements from property owners, which in this case is a single owner, the Bridge Authority. Easements are a critical element of this approach as it secures legal access for the public to walk on and eventually across the private property. With easements in place, an informal trail could be constructed by volunteers or other low-cost methods, thereby quickly opening up the area for passive use recreation. In addition to the recreational benefits, bringing in users to the area would create awareness and support for the trail as a whole, further strengthening any future funding efforts. On to Sisters. The second part of my presentation this evening is a concept plan for the segment of the Fishkill Creek Greenway and Heritage Trail that passes through private property known as the Sisters parcel. The property actually consists of 2 parcels, both of which provide the missing link between 248 Tioronda and Madam Brett Park, operated by Scenic Hudson, which is of course currently open for public use. The Sisters concept plan represents a strategy similar to what I just described for the BHRT. In this case, it gets us closer to the goal of completing the Fishkill Creek Greenway and Heritage Trail by proactively planning unfinished segments of the trail, rather than waiting for developers to do so. This strategy is, of course, a great way to implement the recommendations of the Fishkill Creek Greenway and Heritage Trail Master Plan for properties yet to be developed, but it's also a great tool for advancing the trail through parcels that are unlikely to ever be developed. We first implemented this approach at 2328 Creek Drive, where an 8-foot wide trail and 20-foot wide trail easement was laid out on the property survey, not only prior to development plans, but prior to the sale of the property from the city to the developer. The committee was excited to use the strategy at Sisters because it is currently the only remaining unplanned trail between the train station and East Main Street. The committee worked with Lankin Tully, who had prepared the concept plan for 2328 Creek Drive, starting with parcel access topo maps and using the master plan as a guide. The committee traced the desired route for the trail. Lankin Tully used this as a template to place the 8-foot wide trail and 20-foot wide trail easement over the topo maps, and in the process also generated elevation diagrams that describe how much the trail rises and falls over a given distance. In the north parcel, the trail is placed close to the top of the creek bank and extends from the trail currently under construction at 248 Tyranda to the Scenic Hudson parcel directly above Sucker Falls. The Scenic Hudson parcel separates north and south parcels of the Sisters property. In it, we have proposed a fork allowing future trail users a choice between ADA accessible route and a non-accessible route, which navigates the steep slope between the falls and the North Sisters parcel. The non-accessible route crosses over the old mill race and connects with the current northern terminus of Madam Bet Park, the viewing platform below the falls. The accessible portion of the trail stays at the higher elevation and works its way across MTA-owned parcel before switching back and joining Madam Bet Trail just north of the parking lot.
Hey, Tom, back up one.
I'm sorry?
Back up one slide. I just want to be sure what everyone's seeing. The green is existing trail, and it goes on the blue line to the platform at Suckers Falls. That's the one on the left. And then you're saying that would continue near the creek and come around the bend.
So currently the light blue, if you can hear me.
Yep. Yep.
The light blue is the area along the mill race as it goes alongside that dam.
Yep.
And the end of the green is basically the end of the viewing platform. And across the light blue, when it gets into dark blue, that's Scenic Hudson property. And that property links the light blue area of the southern parcel of the Sisters property to the northern parcel.
Okay.
Here's the northern parcel, which is the link between 248 Tyranda on the right and the Scenic Hudson property on the left. A more detailed survey and design study would be required to determine the exact route for the accessible portion of the trail to ensure that it meets ADA standards. Like the BHRT design report, the Sisters concept plan takes the ideas in the master plan and makes them real. Assuming the property is developed, the concept plan can be used as a guide for the developer in placing both trail and easement. The committee would encourage the council to approve the Sisters concept plan, but also to support a phased strategy similar to what we are proposing for the BHRT. That is, approval for moving forward with securing easements through these parcels. This would allow for the implementation of an informal trail with the all-important public access for the trail. Further, with your approval, we propose to use the same strategy for the remaining segments of the Fishkill Creek Greenway and Heritage Trail. With your support, we would like to begin work on these segments immediately. I would like to conclude by pointing out that the committee has achieved a lot for the city's trail network by taking the long view. The strategy of phased realization of trail access that I've outlined this evening is a way to expedite the process for both the BHRT and the Fishkill Creek Greenway and Heritage Trail. The committee requests that you consider this strategy and hopefully give it your blessing. Thank you very much. And I look forward to any questions that you might have.
Thomas, when you talk about the informal trails through the Sisters property, how does that get funded, or is it just like a goat path temporarily, or who pays for it, who maintains it?
Well, it could be, I mentioned, possibly using volunteer efforts. It could be, there are some organizations, Amy Casala from our committee, who's the project manager for the Fjord Trail, is familiar with some organizations that go through and they do just that. They established informal sort of, kind of glorified goat paths. So I think there's a few options depending on, do we want to go back and try and get a grant even for, something like that, which is kind of hiring a service to come in and do this. I think we could probably do a lot with volunteers. I mean, with the members of the committee, we've been we've been at this a while, and I think there's probably a lot of pent up energy for going out there and actually establishing trails. The one other thing that I would mention, which is really important, that, you know, when I was out at Madame Brett over the weekend looking around, it occurred to me that, you know, there's so many people crawling all over these trails, and particularly in the last year, that, you know, a lot more traffic. People are pushing into areas that are, you know, technically not open. So this area that Lee had just pointed out, that dark blue area in scenic Hudson, which is really not an established trail, you know, it has people walking all over it, and then further into, actually already pushing into the Sisters parcel. In other words, these social trails are already being established by people who really, they want to get out there and they want to experience, you know, exactly, you know, all the great things about, you know, being along the creek, you know, all the things you see and, you know, the beauty, the animals, whatever. You know, I think, so to answer your question, I don't think it would be that difficult. Either we go the route of saying, you know, use the social trail that's already there, or, you know, with a little bit of effort, guide the social trails that are basically being formed as we speak.
Question about that. So I'm aware of the social trails that are extending beyond the mill race and dam at the falls at Madame Brett. And my question essentially is, if we were to say, like, yes, we like the idea of this trail being there and, you know, being expanded and continued and to encourage people to walk upon these trails, would that be opening the property owners up to any liability? Would that be a problem in any way for someone who falls down on those trails? I'm aware of that, for instance, the topography is very steep at some areas on that site, and you know, someone could fall off the mill race. You know, I know that that's always a concern with any of these, you know, whenever anyone's wandering around in the woods, yeah, someone can always trip and fall. But I just want to know if, especially given a, sort of the informality of the trails, that might be more of a consideration than with a much more sort of formally graded trail.
It is. So I think I would actually point back to sort of, you know, kind of continue on along the lines of what I was just saying when I was answering George's question.
If I can interrupt, Tom?
Yeah.
Just to answer Eric's question, New York State General Obligation Law, Section 9-103, provides liability protection for property owners under specific circumstances, most of which are covered, or all of which I would say are covered under the typical trail situation. There are some exceptions as regards use or other things, but generally a property owner opens up their property to the public use in this manner would have certain liability protections. And we can certainly, and have worked with, I think, Trail Committee on advising on this in the past, and it's being discussed with the land use applicants when they come before the planning board for approval, and they actually negotiate and have negotiated in the past the rules to make sure that the use of a trail is consistent with the liability protection afforded under the New York State law, so that these lands can be open for trails with property owners knowing that they're not going to incur that potential liability.
Great, and I'm really happy to hear that, because I was hoping that something like that was going to be the case, because I wouldn't want that concern to deter the property owners from allowing and encouraging this use of the land, and also from anyone from you know, knowing that this is land that they can enjoy when it is appropriate for them to enjoy it, and, you know, and all of that. Because I agree, this Thomas, I think this is a great idea. I know that people are already exploring these trails. It's a beautiful piece of land, and I know that actually from what I've heard, that if you just sort of go up the hill from where the falls are there, you can actually see the Hudson River all the way across to Newburgh. So I don't know if that sort of upslope trail that you had shown on that map would be going along at a high enough elevation to take advantage of that view or not. If so, that would be a wonderful asset to be able to not only have people down in the woods at the falls, but also up the slope to be enjoying that view, to sort of down the stream and across all the way to the Hudson and Newburgh, because that's such a special spot.
Yeah, it really is a magical spot there above the falls. You know, there's so many different characters all along the length of the creek. You know, it changes so much. And yeah, you're right. I mean, you know, we'd definitely be great to get people in there to enjoy it. And Nick, thank you very much for answering that. I was going to hand the second part of that off to you, but it's probably best to, yeah, dive directly into the general obligations aspect of it. The one thing I would add to that, or maybe pose it in the form of a question to you, you know, what I was starting to say is that, you know, maybe all of this is another reason or another kind of a benefit of establishing the trail easements. That do you think that the easements basically outlining, you know, where people should and should not be, or should and do not have the access, you know, establishing where the public can and cannot go. Does that help the case in terms of kind of establishing, you know, the parameters of the liability for the property owner under the general obligations rule?
It does, and the easements themselves have a specific meets and bounds description of the area, and most times there's also a map attached that provides a figure, or it's being part of a land use approval. So there are a number of protections built in: the trail rules, the limitations on the areas that can be used, and then also the New York State law itself.
Right.
And there are some exceptions. If a trail says, I won't go into, there's a number of exceptions that I don't think generally apply, that property owners should be aware of, just to make sure that the uses are being done consistent with the rules of the trail.
Right. So I think establishing the easements, you know, gets us closer to that. So another reason why I think it's a good idea to move on it.
So what would need to happen for, I'm sorry, Amber, you go ahead.
Please finish your thought.
I was just gonna say, what would need to happen for these trails to move forward in their sort of phase one unofficial goat path form?
Well, I mentioned the easements, you know, and not to just kick it back to Nick, but actually Nick and Jennifer and I have already exchanged some emails about this, and, you know, kind of figuring out what the next steps are. We had just recently chimed in on easement language for 248 Tioronda, and before that was approved by the council. And my assumption is that a similar process would take would happen next for this property, but there's a lot I don't know about it, so I would need to defer to Nick and Jennifer about that.
Right, so each one is on a case-by-case basis, and we certainly need the property owners to either have it come through the land use process, or if they want to open up the trails before it's the subject of the land use process, they would come to us, and we would work with them we have a template easement that Tom and his committee had reviewed, and then we would review it with them and start that process. And of course, the city council would have to approve it. And we have a process, not perfect, in place where we make sure we reach out to Tom, hopefully in enough time for his committee to review them. And we can work with him on any future ones that come up.
In the case where the property owner has not made the first move, is it possible to, you know, be proactive about this and initiate the process?
Yeah, there's nothing that prevents the city from, if it's identified a potential trail and it wishes to reach out to the property owner, ask if they will voluntarily work with the city and make their property open, to do so, yes. There's no mechanism other than the city purchasing or taking it via eminent domain to mandating the trail easement be granted, other than it's part of a land use review. So it has to be on a purely voluntary basis.
And also, just to throw it out there, this parcel is squarely within the Fishkill zoning district, so it's written in the zoning code.
Absolutely, yes.
And Era basically went where I was going to go, and so I'll just say I am supportive of moving forward. I think this is really exciting. The report provided on the River Trail was really great. I hope people take the opportunity to read that, because it made me very excited to see that come to life. So just am supportive of moving forward on both of these trails.
Thank you.
on the Riverfront Trail, Tom, does Fishkill have a trail that goes down to the bridge?
You know, the same consultant was working on a master planning process. Actually, maybe they even went through master planning into conceptual design. But anyway, the Fishkill has, for the time being, put those plans on hold, unfortunately. But that was a key aspect of the plan, is that connection under the bridge to those Fishkill communities. I was surprised at how dense the residential community is up there. There's a lot of people up there, and I know they do have planned trail networks in general. But I was, this would have been a fantastic connection. Hopefully they'll pick it up again in the future.
Thanks.
Couple detailed questions about the Riverfront Trail section. Let's see, I'll just try to do this quickly. Who will monitor the video feeds by the bridge? I saw that the videos were going to be required, but I didn't know if that was going to be something that the Bridge Authority themselves were going to be monitoring, or if that was going to be our local police or something else.
I'm pretty sure that, or I guess I should say, I'm assuming that's all going into some server at the Bridge Authority offices. I'm not really sure about that.
I'd love clarification on that, just to know if we're essentially going to be expecting that to be a responsibility of our local city police department, or not. Essentially, that's my main question.
Yeah, I would be.
Ours or theirs?
I would be shocked if that was the case. It really is about them making sure that those abutments, the piers of the bridge, that there's no funny business going on down there. But I can look into that with the consultant and see what his communication with the Bridge Authority, which was extensive, to see if there's any detail there.
Sure, I'm familiar with the bike multi-use trail that goes underneath the George Washington Bridge, and the extensive security surveillance equipment that is there. So I'm assuming this will be something maybe slightly scaled back from that. So another question, there was some discussion in the detailed version of the document that was talking about the surface material, and it was presenting a couple different options as to what the surface material on the trail could be. And I'm just going to express my preference for the stone dust for surfaces below the 5% grade, and then asphalt on the steeper grade surfaces to prevent erosion of the steeper grade areas, but then allow for the stone dust to have a permeable surface on all of the areas where erosion isn't as much of a consideration. So that's definitely my preference.
Well, you have unanimous support from the committee on that. To give you a little bit of clarification or a little bit more background on that, the consultant Dan Biggs included the option for asphalt, because there would possibly be DOT funding options for a trail with that surface. Again, we, as a committee, we strongly prefer the stone dust, and we made that clear. But I think he felt like it was, his responsibility as as the designer, and to make sure that everybody was aware of that option.
Yep, great.
Finish your thought. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, in addition to stone dust in general, also having the asphalt on the steeper sections to make so the steeper sections don't erode. I've seen that on some other multi-use trails and bike trails in the area where the steeper sections were also stone dust, and that went very badly. So.
Yeah,
it's tricky in terms of maintenance.
Any last comments? Obviously, we do have a next step. Tom, you've proposed it, and I think you're absolutely right. I know a lot of these issues should have longer discussions. Okay to push on?
I have one very quick last comment, which is to say, I assume that someone has talked to the folks at Monell, I don't know how it's pronounced, place, the road that's closest to this proposed trail, just to make sure that the residents who are closest to the trail are aware that it's proposed and probably will be happening.
Yes. So we've talked to the residents that were closest to the trail that would have either the property would be abutting or if we had to take anything. Just 2 quick points, Mayor. First, both the Bridge Authority and MTA were actually very good to work with. And then just to go back to Air's comment, or question, I should say, the Bridge Authority will monitor the cameras, but it may have to be, the cost of purchasing may have to be worked into the grant. I'm sorry, into the cost of constructing the trail. So they will monitor it, but we might have to purchase it. That was it.
Anything?
And just to add, Anthony, thank you for all your help with the grant and administrating these projects. So thank you very much, and best of luck.
Yep. You have no idea how excited I am about this. We also have more to talk about because we get the rail line as well, and we have some thinking to do of once the rail line becomes successful, the Beacon line. Does that change some of our thinking? On this side, we've already decided that it's changing our thinking on 248 and on Creek Drive. So, but that's more to come in the future. Okay. And Tom, I just want to thank you for being here, and Mark, if you're also out there, thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. And again, I apologize for just it's such a rich stuff. I mean, this stuff makes me smile. It's just so good. But let's keep going. Main Street Access Committee is next. That's the one that's going to take the longest. Are the people here for that? Is that Stowe and Sarah and John Clark?
Yes.
Would you be willing to wait a little while? Because I want to give you more time.
Sure.
That be okay?
Yeah.
Okay, let's just skip over that because I think that's a presentation with how long do you think it takes, John?
Well, it can take as long as you want with questions, but I would say at least 15, 20 minutes.
All right. If you can do 15, go now. All right. And room for questions afterwards. All right.
Well, Stowe is going to start.
Yeah, well, it's a very small preamble. We've been at work, the committee, for a year now, and we've provided a bunch of memos along the way, which we've put together as a omnibus memo. Sarah and I have worked together like two sides of a single brain over the course of the year, and of course the support of a great committee of people, too many to mention here, and the singular contributions of John Clark. And he's going to give the presentation that condenses a bunch of this, but not all of the material, not all of the ideas that we've put together. And we also have other things in the works. But fundamentally, John's going to present ideas that break what we're suggesting for the city into 3 phases. The first phase is near term, things that can be done relatively quickly, low cost. A second phase of things that require more money, more planning, and represent in particular where phase 1 ideas fail to continue to deal with the issues of the city, such as where we run out of parking even after we have done all the things we propose for phase 1 parking, such as restriping the streets and so on. And then there's a phase 3, which is, years in the future, perhaps, where we can envision Beacon being even more like the growth that we've witnessed in recent years. And we may, in fact, have to do things that are even grander than what we propose in phase 2. So that's just a preamble. Sarah, do you want to add any words of wisdom before we hand it up to John?
No, I just want to thank John for putting all of the words that we put into our omnibus memo into pictures that we can, beautiful pictures that we can all look at. So we'll just turn it over to John, and John, talk fast and you can get through it. There are a lot of recommendations in here.
Yeah, John's the fireworks here, so let's
right.
go.
Colin, can I let me share screen?
Yep. While he's doing that, what I suggest you do, John, put the material on the table. We'll come back for another time and we'll get another full bite at it, right? That's the only way to give it its due.
Are we up?
Yep.
Yay, there it
is.
is.
So you'll see up here, it sort of moves from phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. So you can keep track it up on the corner. But the shorter term recommendations are primarily things that we can do with existing space, existing asphalt, make it more efficient, and make it easier for people to navigate. So for instance, striping the side streets for the first 2 blocks away from Main Street, because a lot of that is inefficiently used. People don't know that they can park there. If you see a striped line, it makes it less like somebody's front yard and more like public parking spaces maintained by the city. That may take a while, but that would help in terms of efficiency. We asked for stop signs at all side streets intersection. There's sort of a hit or miss quality to the stop signs around Main Street. So it's best to just slow everybody down at every intersection, we thought. I think these have already been done, faded crosswalks and Van Nydyck, that was scheduled to be done before the winter hit. I'm not sure it actually got done or not. You'll see on the next slide about public parking signs so that people know where the public lots are. I'll put off that until the next slide. The theory is, at least in the short term, avoid developing any new large-scale public lots. There's a lot of lots out there, as you can see from this map, which shows all the public parking lots along Main Street. There's a lot of spaces out there. They're not always in the where you want to go, but there are a lot of asphalt lots. And with global warming and the heat island effect in cities, the last thing you really want to do is create more surface parking lots that create sort of dead spaces in and around Main Street. So we had a lot of ideas for how to use the asphalt that we have more efficiently. For instance, the Eliza Street lot behind the Rite Aid has a lot of 10-foot spaces. You could stripe 9 feet and get another 7 or 8 spaces out of it. You could do, and I'll show you some sketches on this, diagonal spaces on the west end of Henry Street because the road is wide enough there. If you use Fishkill Avenue, really wide travel lanes right now, if you just move the center line over 3 or 4 feet, you could get 22 spaces up the east side. The Beacon Center lot over by the DMV, the rear portion of that could be restriped and reconfigured to add 37 spaces. It's really inefficient the way it's. So let's show some of those ideas. So here are the concepts for public parking lot. There's sort of 2 sets or 3 sets. One is wayfinding signs like this one up here on the left corner that would be along Main Street at the intersection to get you to a public lot. And we proposed to name the lots, all the lots by primarily the intersecting street. So you go up to the Churchill lot and take a right, you'll get to the Churchill lot. And that way, in theory, your GPS, you not only remember sort of where you are on Churchill Street, if you remember the Churchill lot, but even we assume after a while, Google Maps and places like that will be able to direct you to those lots because therefore they will have a name to attach to them. The second set of lot signs are at the lot entrance itself. So they'll recognize it as a public parking lot, give you a name, and if there's any special postings about times or prohibitions or whatever. And here's a whole bunch of examples. These are going to have to be determined based on each individual lot. But it gives you a nice, clean, recognizable public parking lot signage system. Here's the west end of Henry Street. The east end is already striped at diagonal. It's the same width up here, so there's no reason you can't put it in, except that this lot has an entrance here and an entrance here, which really interrupts the parking. So we're suggesting to close that entrance. It's redundant. You don't really need it. And that way you could get an additional 12 spaces along here just by restriping. And then if you wanted to get ambitious, you could restripe the main lot because the way it is now is really inefficient the way it's done. It's not necessarily safe. And you don't get that many spaces out of it, net gain, but you get an entrance that actually works with the aisle system. So it's much more efficient for, say, emergency vehicles to get in and out of it. And there's room to get out of these spaces without bumping up against a curb or another car. So you get the net gain of 12 spaces there. Here's the configuration of the existing county lot. It can be restriped to get 2 new aisles here and here. It's wide enough to do it. Even without redoing this, which is incredibly inefficient the way that's laid out, you get 37 new spaces. On Fishkill Avenue here shows 22 spaces up to where the curve starts. Because there's hardly any driveways along here, it's very efficient for getting cars parked along that street. All you have to do is move the center line and stripe the spaces and get DOT to agree to it, which may be the hardest thing. The same thing on the west end of Main Street. Route 9D, which is another state highway, at least numbered so, is really inefficient. This is a sketch I did back in 2007 for this street. So just by changing the lane widths to something that's respectable, not oversized, you can get parking along the side next to West End Lofts, and you can get 25 spaces just on the first block. You could go another block if you wanted to. And in addition to that, I'm proposing that instead of having this two-way left turn lanes, that just more asphalt to put in street trees down the middle on a planted median, so you actually have something that looks like a boulevard at the entrance to your city rather than an arterial.
It's worth noting that that new development is already completely overfull in the parking lots behind them. So
yeah,
that part of town is going to be short of parking.
Per unit, and they provided exactly that. So there's not a lot of visitor parking around there. The city is also in the process, I understand, of acquiring this lot, which would be another 70 or so spaces if it was striped out to maximize the space there. So there's lots of opportunity to get spaces without doing a lot of work in the first phase. Now, these from here on in, we're in phase 2 because they do involve a little extra work at the very least. And we looked at the 2 intersections down on East Main Street and thought that this, the curb extension project is going to go as far as Teller, but this end of Main Street needs some work, especially this intersection is wide open, not enough crosswalks, no street trees, confusing for people who come up to this and not know which way to go around the W light. So we're suggesting something like this: narrow up the intersection to where it's just 2 lanes wide, which makes for crosswalks that are shorter, 3-way stop, so everybody stops, so everybody can look at each other before they move forward and look at pedestrians, and a stripe here so that people know that on this leg, you go to the left of the light rather than trying to sneak around the right of the light, which happens. And by doing that, you get trees in multiple places where there aren't one now.
Hey, John, that like brick colored, that brick color that you have reaching up to the dummy light, is that paint or would that be, what would that be?
I saw it as pavers, brick pavers, but it could be paint or it could be striped.
Okay.
All right, keep going.
I think John might have hung for a minute. John, are you stuck?
It looks frozen a little.
Seems to be frozen.
Yeah.
I'd just like to, while we're frozen, on
This one,
this intersection.
There he is. He's back.
He's back.
What's that?
You were frozen for a minute, John.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I'm up now. Okay. This is Churchill Street, which goes to one of the 4 or 5 bridges in Beacon. So and there's a lot of new development here. It's got a very awkward angle. You're not allowed to take a right turn, which doesn't make a lot of sense because people want to do that. So they do it anyway. People come around this curve much too fast. They can't see because of the parked cars that are over here. So they sneak up on this crosswalk, or people who are jaywalking here, which is a logical place to jaywalk because you might want to eventually get down to the Churchill Street lot, but there's no sidewalk here. There's no handicap ramp because it's steep. So there's a lot of problems with this intersection. So what I tried to do was remove the parked cars here so that you have better visibility at the apex of that curve, extend the street out here so that this is narrower. And this gets you to walk around that fire plug right there, fire hydrant. And it also brings you up the hill a little bit farther, so you can stop on a flat stop instead of stopping on the steep part of that hill. And it's curved now so that you can take that right-hand turn. There's no prohibition against it. And we put in an extra crosswalk here to logically get people from this side of the street down that side of the street to get to the Churchill lot. And we put in steps here on the steep part and a handicap ramp that wraps around a little pocket park here that has great views of the mountain.
I think it's safe to say this is the worst intersection in town right now. I mean, for example, at this part where you walk up the hill right at the moment, there's a swale that you have to walk through. It's not a sidewalk. It's not even a dirt path. It's this concave swale that in a rainy day, for example, literally is channeling water. So it's ghastly.
I'm going to suggest we stop with the short term because you've about done with the near term. That's actually a decent stopping point. Consider that part one, okay?
Okay.
When you're done, we'll take questions there and then we'll pick up part two next time.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll leave the real fireworks for later.
I know.
There is one more phase 2 item if you want me to sneak it in.
Yes.
In 2 minutes. Yes, John, you can explain it. Yes.
Okay. We wanted to do a bike plan for Beacon. None of the committee felt qualified to do it. Bikes are things that really need expertise in order to figure out how the logistics of it works. So we laid out a basic set of bike routes that are off the main drag, but somewhat get you where you want to go. Particularly this one north-south on Cedar Street, which would get you from the schools and the parks down through the center of the city and over to the South Avenue Park. So we thought that would be phase 1 of phase 2. And we recommended, I think, that the city look for a grant. They've already in the process of doing this, to hire somebody to really do a real bike plan for Beacon because it really needs it. There's a lot of bikers out there who are floundering around on all these side streets that don't go anywhere. And here's what I mean by a bicycle boulevard. You can do it just temporarily by blocking half of the street so that fire trucks or moving trucks or garbage trucks or people who live on this street can get there. But it closed the through traffic. So it slows it down so bikes can take the full lane and use it. And then if it's successful as a temporary thing, it could be made more permanent by having either landscape barriers or sign barriers or traffic circles that calm people down so that they don't speed up and down these streets. They allow them to go at the speed of bicycles and only for local purposes primarily. So I think those are the phase 3 or phase 2 and phase 1 commentary. And if you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer. Otherwise, we can move on.
I just wanted to note one thing is that we had postponed a number of discussions about other things that might happen right on Main Street because we're waiting for the bump outs and other already planned initiatives on Main Street, moving hydrants and so on. But we are in fact working on a survey with store owners and business owners to find out about loading zones and local parking issues and so on. But that's work for 2021.
It's hard to do parking surveys in the middle of a pandemic. Patterns are all but there is sort of a phase 1, phase 2, 3 on parking. One is to do what you can with existing. The second one is to go to paid parking option. And then the third one is to go to structured parking, which can be helped to be financed by the phase 2 parking fees.
I'm not going to take that up tonight.
Yeah, we'll save that for the next.
It's in the memos if you want to get a preview. Just read that omnibus memo and you'll see it.
Right.
At the next phase next time. So just talking about the squeeze parking, the interesting commitment not to do additional surface street lots, the striping, the signs, and then the couple of intersections where you've got to repurpose them at the east end, and then the bike boulevards. Pretty awesome set of stuff, right?
Yep. We've been busy.
Any comments, questions?
Got a couple comments and questions. I'll try to be quick. The overall fantastic. Love it, love it, love it. On the Churchill Street intersection, John, would you mind pulling up the yes, perfect. The one thing I would recommend changing on this is the 2 parking spaces that remain on sort of the upper left-hand corner of this image near where the words Main Street appear. In my experience, cars that are coming around the corner going from, let's see, from the east end of Main Street down towards the west end of Main Street, coming around the corner here, don't see cars that are pulling in or out of parking spaces at that location. And I've observed a number of near accidents.
Yep.
And so I would encourage those 2 parking spaces to also be removed.
Yeah, we were trying to maintain as much street parking as possible. We thought that having this crosswalk here would slow people down so that they don't go speeding around that corner the way they used to or they do now.
I would
And
hope so, but
having this space open, you would be able to see around that corner because it sort of straightens out as you come there.
Yeah, the other thing is by widening the sidewalks, it has a natural tendency to slow drivers down, even though they have exactly the same amount of surface street, perhaps. They drive slower when the bump outs are
Right.
confronting them.
It's both the slowness, it's also the visibility. They just can't see what's coming, coming around that corner. They wouldn't know that there's a car that's pulled out at a weird angle, stopped as they're trying to badly park. So that would still be my encouragement, even with what you shared.
That's a great suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with Council Member Rhodes. I mean, I think I might have driven on Churchill Street maybe 3 times in the last 9 years just to avoid that dangerous turn. But yeah, getting rid of those parking spaces is going to make a big difference because the visibility coming on that turn is really low. So I want to thank you for your attention to this. This is a really important one.
That would also potentially increase a turning radius, because another thing I've noticed, and you've probably paid attention to this already, but is for instance trucks coming up Tyranda and then making a turn in either direction onto Main Street at this location have sort of a narrow turning radius, and sometimes have to do deep, 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 deep. And so, but by eliminating those 2 spaces, it might give them more of the space that they need to make that turn effectively.
Well, it may add some extra fire to this discussion. Is we know for a fact that this is a very dangerous intersection because, among other things, in talking with the Department of Traffic, we know that fire hydrant at the top of Churchill Street gets knocked down almost every month by people driving too fast down the street at night, and they smash into the fire hydrant. And they actually have to keep fire hydrants around. They have to order them in advance so they can repair the fire hydrant every month. So we have a danger going down the other way as well. So this is a very dangerous intersection.
Yeah, I think that's just what I was going to ask, is that parking is at a premium everywhere. I do see that we're already taking a couple of spots away. So if we had any data that can help us determine how dangerous an intersection is or isn't, I think that would be helpful.
Well, it's certainly possible to take the parking away if afterwards you determine, if you've done all these other things, oh, it's still dangerous, let's get rid of those parking spaces.
Having lived on that practically at that intersection for 15 years, I know how dangerous Churchill Street is, and I was wondering, did you guys consider turning that into a one-way, or consider traffic patterns at all?
Well, it's problematic because at the bottom of the hill now we have a big parking lot, which is really kind of critical to that end of town. There really aren't other.
Yeah, well, the only thing I've always thought of it would be have its own problems, but if it was going one way downhill and it prohibited cars from going up that hill, because during icy events and wet events, particularly if you have a standard vehicle and you're switching gears, I've seen many people slip down that road. and also making that right-hand turn even with the bump out. I think for the most part, if that becomes a legal turn, they tend to, as they make that turn, they tend to go into oncoming traffic because they can't make such a tight radius.
Well, as John mentioned, he's in this redoing of the intersection, he's moved the traffic stop higher, so it's actually on a level. So you're not actually going to be on the incline while you're waiting.
But if there's two cars waiting, one of them would be on the incline.
Right, but
Right.
I'm not sure how often that happens. But you're right. If we have more and more traffic, that's going to happen. It's inevitable.
It happens quite a bit because I have a standard vehicle and I avoid that because I don't want a car behind me when I'm sitting on the top of that hill. Anyhow,
We can bring that back to the committee, but again, just as Stowe said, I think how you would get, where you would divert traffic to take another route up to Main Street would be something we'd have to look at.
yeah, because we did
It's
retain,
important right now.
yeah, we did retain the right when we built that parking lot for through traffic to go through the back of 1 East Main and hook up with East Main Street over there. So there are some options. I'm not sure, there's no good solution or perfect solution, but it's certainly worth considering. And just another point in this about this intersection is there's a number of restaurants in that area and delivery trucks are often a problem. And I don't know how to control that. And just wondering if you guys considered that. And
yeah, we're doing a survey specifically dealing with loading zones because there really are very few. There's a few in the zoning rules, but most of them aren't signed, so they're not really being used as loading zones, with the exception of one next to the town crier. And so all the loading and unloading that's going on in Beacon is pretty informal, catch as catch can, sort of store by store arrangements. So how trucks get to, various places in order to load and unload is very, very different in different parts of the city.
yeah, I just know that in this intersection, they tend to be at the worst possible place at times. And again, I don't know the solution.
Right.
I don't envy you guys to try to figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for that. Who knows? Maybe some of the parking spaces, the 2 parking spaces that we need to get rid of up there on Main Street can turn into loading zones. So, because trucks would be more obvious than cars parked there. So
Yeah.
we'll bring it back to the committee. Thank you.
I think that's a good idea.
So, sorry, no, go Dan, I'm sorry.
I think we lost John too, by the way.
I'm here.
Now, there he is. He's still there.
So
We lost
just
the mayor.
the ADA, the accessible ramp here, you're able to get shallow enough declines to get like a wheelchair down that?
Yes, I mean, it's all conceptual. I don't have contours, 2-foot contours to be able to do it exactly, but based on the contours that I had, which were 5-foot contours, those runs are long enough that they meet the ADA standards.
Okay.
Which would be real nice since we have that parking lot there.
That area where the tree and the ramp is belongs to MTA as well. So it goes along with the rail line right away.
And is there, because the plan cuts off where it does, is there going to be more sidewalk? So the sidewalk, I'm trying to picture it. The sidewalk at 7 Creek Drive picks up right at the parking lot entrance there?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes.
And is there one on the other side, on the brewery side?
No, this is kind of steep and
Okay.
difficult right in here. So we put the sidewalk on this street, you would come down and then you would cross into the entrance down here.
Mm-hmm. So the reason I bring that up is there is this tricky thing where people are coming out of the brewery and crossing kind of diagonally up Churchill Street up to the corner that you're redesigning. And, I know that there might not be anything that we can do with that, but I wonder if there should be a crosswalk near the entrance to the parking lot or something, because when you turn there and it's dark at night and you come down, you sweep down and there's people walking up towards you and you have to slam on your brakes. It's super dangerous. And I'd love to know if there's something that we can do about that.
Right.
is proposing a crosswalk down here.
I don't know if that would help, but yeah, I know.
Well,
there's-
it would certainly help if people knew that there was an actual sidewalk on the other side of the street. Right now, it's just like road.
yeah.
So
Right.
people don't have a strong incentive to cross over and then walk up on this side of the street, with the church side of the street, if you will. But if there was a sidewalk and a stairway and a handicap ramp, I mean, people would have a really strong incentive to walk over there because it'd be a real sidewalk.
So this, just to say, this would help us with our hydrant situation. But also, we actually just moved the hydrant back and put a bollard there, so a short term. But this certainly would help us with that.
Good.
Right. I think the other thing is, if you notice today, that sidewalk where the hydrant is, it's only, the curb is only about 1.5 inches high.
Yeah.
So there's not much of an impediment for somebody driving over that sidewalk and smashing into the fire hydrants. So I guess we'll defer the rest of our slides and the phase 3 for a subsequent meeting sometime.
I'll also suggest to council that any other comments that you have on the phase 1 or 2, we can also bring it up at the time, and then we'll start developing sort of where are we heading next. What's interesting is in the governor's budget, they still have DRI grants, which are Downtown Revitalization Initiative grants, which are the $10 million ones. The county hasn't won one of those yet, and there's only 2 cities. We made an application last year, and I would bet that some good plans on downtowns and access and bike lanes would look pretty good. So we should try to package this up.
Sounds great.
Yep.
All right,
I'll
go
email you my comments about the bike lanes.
Can you wait till next one? Well, you'll be the first one up next time.
Yep.
Okay. Cool. So thank you. And again, I apologize having to push people along, but this one will break into parts. The second phase will go through the rest of the document, take all our questions on the first phase, including the bike lanes, and we'll figure out next steps as well. So I'm thoroughly excited by this. There's a lot of stuff in tonight's agenda I'm very excited by, and this is certainly great work. And I want to thank Sarah and John and the entire team.
Yep.
Thank you. And again, there are a lot of things you can do that don't cost a lot of money that would make a big difference, like the parking signs, the striping, those things are
stop
not
signs.
major expenses. Yeah. So thank you all.
Thanks.
See you in a couple of weeks. All right. Apologize, but that's how it works. We've got 5 more items to go, and then personnel, and 2 items in executive session. Traffic safety, can I just get Nick, can you give me just sort of an overview of what the law says in terms of traffic safety? And that can open up the discussion. I don't know if we'll finish that, but let's just start there.
Fair enough, Mayor. Yes, I'm going to turn to my screen, so I apologize for the side view, which is not my better view if I have one. Section 65 of the city code references the creation of the Traffic Safety Committee. 65-2 talks about its composition, and 65-3 talks about the powers and duties. We also have to look at other sections of the city code, specifically, for example, section 211-2, authority to install traffic control devices and the adoption of regulations, empowers the city traffic safety committee to make recommendations, and their approval is required before the city council can then adopt a local law controlling and putting in a new stop sign, for example, or a yield sign or something of that nature. As I understand it, the reason behind creating the traffic safety committee, which is permitted by New York state law, is a number of reasons. Legally, you just can't put up a stop sign. There needs to be a reason for it, because putting up a stop sign could have adverse impacts and create an unsafe condition, for example, because maybe there's too many stop signs, or like putting a stop sign in this area is not an appropriate sight distance for people to see around the corner when they turn. So to avoid that liability, the Traffic Safety Committee was created, along also with to make sure that there's a, if you will, disinterested, objective viewpoint looking at this, because as you can imagine, one of the hot topics in any community is putting up stop signs or speed humps or speed bumps. So there needs to be uniformity to also protect the city from liability, and so that it's not just going up because 300 constituents happen to sign a petition. There needs to be a standard followed in the law. And so the Traffic Safety Committee consists of a variety of members as set forth in the city code. And I'll read the composition of 5 members. 2 members to be appointed by the mayor, subject to the city council approval, the police chief, the superintendent of streets, and a representative of the planning board of the city, designated by the planning board. And so that in a nutshell, and I can go into more detail if necessary, but the Traffic Safety Committee exists to review, among other things, but primarily the traffic control devices, parking, signs, and certainly the members of the committee who are on the call tonight can go into more detail, but that's the general overview.
So I just wanted that for a starting point. I will add one thing regarding history. The council a number of years ago kind of said, you know, even post the creation of this, that we wanted to leave things with the Traffic Safety Committee, not just for commonality of standards and having a, you know, common viewpoint on how to do things, but also just otherwise everything just comes to council. And this isn't dramatically different than, you know, approving hires of junior staff, right? It's just something that I don't know if the council wants to do. So we were very happy to kind of give it to the Traffic Safety Committee. If we don't like the composition, we can certainly, you know, ask for changes in who's on it. That's up to the mayor to propose and the council to approve. But that's kind of how it works. So any comments on that? And that we've got, I think we've got the chief and the highway department chair and the chair of the committee, Matt Dubetsky, around. If there are any questions.
Dan, do you want to go first or should I go first?
Go ahead.
So I'm glad that we have the opportunity to discuss this process because I had been curious. And thank you for the clarification. My main question with this had been about the sort of the advisory role that the traffic committee takes. And first of all, thank you to everyone who serves on the traffic committee and to the recommendations and time that you put into reviewing all of the things you have to review. I know that it must be a lot to review, and I really appreciate the work that you put into it. My main question was the way that it's presented in the city charter is that the traffic committee presents recommendations and advice to the council and the mayor, and then we accept that advice and we accept their recommendations and act upon that. And so my question is, if we are, if we sort of disagree with, based on our experience or understanding of the city, the recommendations or advice of the traffic committee, do we have the ability to do something other than what they recommend? And I'm especially now, especially curious about that, given the way that it was just presented, that the traffic committee, you know, is really there to be impartial, and we can't be doing things just because, you know, 300 people present a petition. I think of the role of the council, especially as representing the, you know, the will of the people. And so, for instance, here in Ward 2, West Center Street there's a lot of drag racing that goes on here, and you know, people are really concerned about the very fast cars that go up and down this one particular street, as well as others, but here is where I'm hearing about it. And so based on the feedback that I'm hearing from my constituents, I'm hearing that this street is a concern for speeding. But that may or may not be the same kind of data that the traffic committee is looking at or receiving or basing their recommendations on. So you can use that as an example, or look at other examples that you may have reviewed recently. But if I have, you know, if I were to go to the traffic committee and say, you know, people are drag racing up and down West Center Street, and the traffic committee says like, oh, we don't see a problem there. It looks like kind of we're at a standstill. And based on my understanding of the charter, it seems like the mayor and the council have the authority to be making the decisions about what to do. But based on my experience of the way things actually go, it seems like the traffic committee really has more of the decision-making and final decision authority. So I'm just looking for more clarification on that.
Yeah, and we should dive into it a bit more when we have more time, when I can sort of provide the council with all the applicable regulations, because there are New York State guidelines, the New York State Highway Manual that comes into play also, that talks about when you can put a stop sign in and areas and signs of that nature. And I think the way the code sets it up actually is that the traffic safety, you've delegated your authority to the Traffic Safety Committee. And then interestingly, the Traffic Safety Committee has to get your consent so that you ratify these approvals. We'd have to dive into it more to see whether you have the authority, now that you've delegated to the Traffic Safety Committee, to, in essence, you can reject something, but can you then adopt your own, if you will? And so I'd have to look into that a bit more. And I think one of the things you hold the public hearing, and you certainly should invite members of the Traffic Safety Committee to come and probe those questions with them. Well, why are you saying no? Maybe they're not seeing it. Maybe it's an enforcement issue and they feel it's better controlled by more policing rather than by putting signs up. And I think there should be more of that dialogue to answer those questions. And again, I'm sorry to speak for speaking for members of the Traffic Safety Committee. Please weigh in. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm interested in what Nick has to say legally. I had understood as that, we had final say, but that we should be rather circumspect about, how often we would ever overturn and why and how we build a record to do that.
Well, that is correct, Mayor. There needs to be a basis for overturning, or other than it's deemed arbitrary and capricious, and it may expose the city to liability. If you have your Traffic Safety Committee, who you've delegated this to, and they're the experts, if you will, because they understand the law and the rules and the highway, but the highway guidance manual it's a rather thick book that I'm sure the chief and Mickey can attest to, and it's not straightforward reading either. So if we're ignoring a guideline or potentially ignoring it, we would need to set forth the basis in the record why we're doing so.
If I may, this conversation came up because I disagreed with a conclusion that the Traffic and Safety Committee made, but I did it with a little trepidation, I was a little uncomfortable about it because I'm not an expert on this. I only know what the neighbors down there said. And so, I followed the process as it had been described to me. So when I said if I disagree with something with a conclusion that the Traffic and Safety Committee made, I was told, oh, well, that's only advice anyway. You can bring it up. And I said, oh, how? And they said, oh, just bring it up at the next city council meeting. So I did. What I would have preferred, I think, is something kind of similar to what Nick is describing, which is, can I have an opportunity to make a case for something? Or can it be a discussion, meaning when the Traffic and Safety comes back with a rationale for why they made a decision, can I have a chance to just say, hey, did you look into X, Y, and Z? Just so that it's a dialogue and not we said this, but you want that. And it's all feels kind of abrasive. What I'd really prefer is just people working together on what is really needed at a given intersection.
Dan, I think that's appropriate. I think your job is to vet it, is to ask those questions and make sure you're satisfied that there's a rational basis for what they're proposing. I think where we get into the difficulty where that's overridden without any basis. And I think you're describing something different, where you just want to get more into an understanding as to why and having that discussion.
Yeah, I've asked a few questions about the process, and it's never been described to me that I have a chance to say appeal or meet with the Traffic and Safety Committee and talk to them about why I brought something. And often my request to the Traffic and Safety Committee, I don't think Anthony probably thinks I send one a month, but I think I've only sent maybe 5 since I've been in office. And some have been submitted by other council members as well. But I think when I was asking about the process, nobody ever described for me that, oh, well, why don't, maybe you should put together an argument as opposed to 2 sentences like, hey, can we look at this intersection, which is what I normally write, as opposed to here are some reasons why I think this needs to be looked at. I've never put together any kind of comprehensive case.
Yeah, I think the more information you can provide the Traffic Safety Committee as to why something is going to them is only helpful to them, and something that the chief and the members of the committee would review. Mm-hmm. And if something were not clear to them, I can only assume they would reach out to you for clarification. I also suspect all the other council members are just signing your name to all of their requests.
look suspicious if they're not Ward 4. I guess what what I'd like to propose is that we, that we try to find a place in the process for dialogue. And maybe that doesn't need to be written into the local law, but I would appreciate like a conversation between a proposer of an idea and those who decide.
Isn't that what happens at the Traffic Safety Committee? I mean,
I was never invited to discuss the thing that I proposed, and I was never kind of given the only, like, for example, this one that I was talking about on Rendy and Crescent, the conclusion said that there was nothing warranted and that vehicles should yield when they take a left. And what I was thinking was like, well, yeah, they should yield when they take a left there, but they're not. And that's why we, so there was no real conversation ever. And I wasn't like invited to talk to anybody or told that there was an opportunity to, or it was my first time with the process. So
yeah, I mean, I've actually been to a couple, and because I get all the traffic issues. The one in particular is Mackin Avenue. Where people, same as with Air and West Center. It's like there's a lot of speeding, down that street, and it's kind of frustrating because I brought it up more than once. And my constituents are still not happy, and they think that we're not doing anything about it. So it makes it a little difficult. I'm wondering if there can be a better solution, or we can get information back to our constituents as to why there isn't a speed bump, or why there isn't something to measure the speed limit. So. I don't know. I think it's a work in progress, but I would like to figure this out.
I do think it's a fine line also between explaining information and the reason behind the request to the Traffic Safety Committee, and then also perhaps transferring, becoming more of an advocate for it, because it's their job to make these determinations, and it's not meant to be an adversarial process, because ultimately you're then going to be voting on something. So I think you've got to sort of weigh that in the balance when you are appearing before them or dialoguing with them.
So
it's not like a land use board meeting, if you will.
So Dan, I do apologize because I don't think it was clear to me. I thought it was recommendations, and I thought the best way was for you to present your idea, which you did, right? You were following my advice. But maybe what we can do is working with the committee and Colin and certainly Nick, and maybe I don't think the law needs to change, but maybe if we come up with a policy or a process that's clear to everybody, and maybe not only clear to the council, but also clear to the public, right? And we can kind of, these are the steps, and where everybody fits in the steps, right? And I think that might make it clear to all of us.
Yeah. I think one good practice, if I can suggest it, would be that anybody who wants to send something to the Traffic and Safety Committee for review should focus on, this is what I've tried to do, is focus on the problem that you're trying to solve instead of trying to suggest a solution. So like when I originally brought up Crescent and Rendy, I said, maybe it's a stop sign, but maybe it's a landscaped island similar to what we were just seeing in the Main Street Access Committee, because I didn't want to say stop sign or nothing and make a decision about a stop sign. I want to slow that traffic down that's taking left-hand turns coming out of Crescent, So I think that's actually a good practice for problem solving, is trying not to start with a proposed solution.
And I guess just, Anthony, this is probably a question for you. I believe pre-COVID, anybody could go to the Traffic Safety Committee meetings. I don't know that we're publishing the agendas, but that would probably be helpful so that when an item is being discussed. Are they doing virtual meetings that are open for people to attend and to participate in?
They are, right? So Colin can probably, yeah, they do them. I think it's monthly, Colin, please correct me, but they are by Zoom and they are virtual, and they should be posted, but
they are.
And we can make that clear. They are, Colin?
Yeah, the meetings are the fourth Thursday of the month at 9 a.m. And the invitations can be found in the calendar on the website.
And is the agenda posted prior to the meeting so that if there's a particular interest that you have? You know when it's being discussed?
I need to do a better job of posting those agendas. There is a running list of the items that are being discussed. You can find the minutes on their website, but the agenda, we can do a better job of getting that up early.
Okay. And I think something too, that I've seen happen in the past, and maybe this is a question for Chief Frost, when we hear, people are really speeding or not stopping at this intersection, I think there is some kind of, I'm not saying this happens every time, but that there is some monitoring that goes on to kind of get whether that is the whole story, and kind of understand what the problem is. So Chief Frost, I believe you all do that.
Yeah, when we do get a complaint, we, especially when it's speeding or running stop signs or something, we assign officers to the area for a while and monitor the situation. Obviously, we're not doing a good job of communicating things back to council members when they made the request. And as the, being part of the committee, we need to be better at that. And but that is one of the things we do is we start off with enforcement and get officers there. And if and not every complaint we find a problem at, because sometimes, for instance, speeding, you have somebody drives by fast once in a while, but the complaint is people drive fast all the time. And we don't always see that while we're there. And then we also have a machine that actually measures the speed of vehicles also. So if us being there, we're not seeing the problem, but the problem's still being reported, we'll put a speed measuring device there to see what that's telling us and see what maybe we're missing as police officers. Obviously, we can't be on that street 24/7, but the machine can be. And obviously, we'll get together the next meeting, and I'll talk to the other parties there about us getting a little bit better and getting back to you.
I think, just real quick, I apologize. I think Mickey, the highway superintendent, is also on the line. I think, Mickey, did you want to make a comment?
Yes, I just want to chime in as well, Council. Basically, when we sit down in our traffic safety committee meetings, along with what Chief Frost is saying, part of the discussion is maybe what has occurred at these intersections, traffic history, accident history, again, enforcement issues. We kind of, like Chief Frost just said, we kind of start by looking at the enforcement, set the counter up, and see what that area, what that street issues are. And like he said, I mean, we've had situations where we have looked into it based on neighborhood complaints. And when we set up the traffic counter that regulates or registers speed, there's not a lot of issue. Maybe one speeder out of 2,000 cars. I mean, we do our studies. We try to look at certain things. There's also certain areas where stuff is requested. And actually right now we have 3 different intersections that we're looking to do traffic studies on, but we're just waiting to get through the pandemic and get traffic back to normal to get a true reading on these issues. So again, like Chief Frost has said, maybe better communication and getting back and responding on the committee's end to follow up with the council as to what we are doing would probably eliminate any kind of headaches or frustrations.
If I can just, sorry, go ahead.
I was saying, feel free to disagree with us. This isn't
No.
why. I mean, we both want to do the same thing. We want to make things safer for the city, and we can have different opinions and talk about it. That's fine. It's nothing confrontational if you disagree with us.
Yeah, totally.
Fine with that. And we present stuff to you, and you don't always agree, and sometimes you do, but that's just part of us, trying to get things done.
No, exactly. And I totally understand that, we're all trying to make decisions based on reality and facts. Just to give a bit of feedback that I'm sure you all know and absolutely take into consideration. For instance, I'm aware that when some of my neighbors put in a complaint to the Traffic Safety Committee regarding the speeding on West Center Street, I saw that y'all came out and were monitoring the speed and the traffic on this street here. And and my neighbors were all saying, "Drive slow, the cops are out." And so just, you know, that because of the way that people are aware of the presence of the speed monitoring, that will affect the way that people behave when the monitoring is taking place. So it may or may not reflect the normal behavior of traffic while, you know, while the monitoring is taking place. So that's why I think it's really useful to get not only just the, you know, the information from, you know, the speed guns and the, you know, the observation of the officer in the car and the, you know, the monitoring equipment, but also the, you know, the observations of people who live in the neighborhood I consider to be equally valid. And that's all I'm going to say on that.
All right, let me try the last comment. So, you know, I've watched several dozen of these over the years, and I would say a number of them are absolutely legitimate requests, and a number of them are really not when taken in context. The one that I will point out that Terry mentioned, Mackin, I was on all the emails, Mackin. I know that intersection well, and it was the one street off of 9D, which would be the least likely street for someone to take during rush hour to cut off to do a shortcut, because you dead end into a one-way street heading south when almost everyone's trying to head north, right? And clearly, Church Street, West Church, and Ralph would be better ones, and in fact are more frequently used by people trying to cut. But the people on Mackin were better organized and had a voice. And those are all legitimate reasons, but that's a reason why you want to have a process, have everyone heard, put data on the table, and make, you know, sort of rational decisions a little dispassionately. I think the important part that we should do is just make sure that our agendas for traffic safety get announced. When council members ask for stuff, they should be prompted of, here, it's coming, you know, organize your crew, or, you know, have people come speak so they're heard. That doesn't mean it'll alter the outcome, because if the facts are really different, it's okay, right? But I think that process of being heard is the main thing I'm hearing here, and I just think we should do that, you know, as always, can always do it better. That work as the last comment, or I'll give the last one to anybody. Okay. So let's do better notices when a council member puts up, make sure they see it. Council members, if you've got constituents, especially you ward folks, because it's your job, I get it. You know, bring them there, make sure they come and speak their view, and then look for that evidence that would support, you know, a solution for them or a solution that fits. All right. I'm gonna go on. It's 8:47. We have 4 items to go in executive session, so I'm gonna keep going. And we can always bring it up if there's additional information. Tie around a bridge, Tom Cole. You got 10 minutes.
Okay, can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
I will try and keep it to much less than 10 minutes. I've been working with Anthony over, I guess, the past several months. I think it was May, I came to a council meeting to show the concept that we'd worked out. And we've since progressed those plans to what we call the 90% level, which is we're done with the engineering. There's some QA QC. We have coordination with outside agencies, the environmental agencies, things like that to continue. But as part of that, I believe the council members are aware, we started this project 4.5 years ago, and took many trips down different alternatives before we agreed on a final product. And as part of that, we did spend quite a bit of the original budget on those alternatives, which we didn't propose. We're at the point where to complete the project, I have to ask for a third amendment to our contract, as set forward in the letter to Anthony from the 13th of November.
This will get us to Tom, so in your memo here, you had a couple of alternatives. One could just get us to design and one could get us through construction, correct? I think the high-
Correct.
get us all
Yeah,
there.
one is to complete design, which is an additional forgive the rounding, $145,000. And then just also whether it's now or later or in some other fashion, just an estimate of what we believe would be the engineering and construction supervision fee to actually complete the project through the end of construction.
And then just since it's been a while, just for the council and the public, remember this was the historic design of the bridge. This was a pedestrian bridge. It was emergency access. I think, Tom, correct me, was there bollards in there?
Correct.
So again, just to, since it has been a while, just again to remind everybody that what we were talking about.
Yes, yeah, this would provide it would turn the current utility bridge, which is fenced off, blocked off, into a pedestrian-only walkway that is capable of supporting emergency vehicles in an emergency. There's the way we have it designed. There's one bollard in the middle of the bridge width that would prevent large vehicles. And I suppose someone in an ATV could sneak past if they were so determined. But it would allow pedestrians, wheelchairs, and bicyclists to use the walkway, and this bollard would be keyed with a universal key, so it can be removed very quickly by emergency personnel to provide vehicular access over the bridge. And part of this project is restoring kind of the last remaining arch that's been stored over at the DPW yard, and constructing 5 arch trusses that look as close as we can get them with modern materials and modern construction methods. So the overall effect is to try and restore the bridge to its pre-1980s appearance, before the removal of the trusses and the installation of the additional girders for the utility bridge.
A question from me, Tom. I remember we looked at a budget for the engineering for this bridge. I think it was last spring or maybe like late spring. I think it was right when quarantine started. Is that right, guys? We looked at a budget about a year ago, I think, or maybe a little less. So the budget has gone up since we last looked at it. And what happened in the last year, I guess, that made the number go up?
Well, our last amendment to the contract was, I believe, in 2017, and about a year ago was when we met with the mayor to arrive at this concept and start down the road for final design. We made every effort to stay within the budget as it was then, but the addition of these fabricating these decorative trusses and putting in the stonework and things like that have added to our engineering fee since then.
Thanks. So basically design elements were a big driver.
Correct.
Yeah, and just for the history of it, I described where we're heading now. The reaction, I don't know if it was Tom or one of your colleagues said, "Oh, you mean what we originally proposed?" And it was like, I guess so.
I think it's a good compromise to get us something that restores the bridge to its original appearance and at least provide some utility for the community. So.
Hey, Tom, if I could ask a quick question. I'm just starting this last week.
Sure.
The additional money for the contract, is that simply for you to do the PS&E?
Yes, that would be through PS&E and contract documents.
Okay. And where are you at? Do you still have permit coordination and other parts of that?
Coordination and just coordination with SHPO to get a final determination, are our outstanding tasks at this point. Yes.
All right. Thank you.
Have you been in touch with SHPO on this? Have they done anything further?
I've coordinated with our sub-consultants on the SHPO findings, and we've prepared some documentation for them. I have not contacted them directly yet.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't. They were cautious about saying, "Glad you're doing this. Don't know if it will have an impact on, whatever." I'm just interested in what they would say.
Yeah, to be honest, our historic preservation sub-consultant has some doubts as to whether SHPO will maintain the historic listing, and his take is that given that these arches were removed, the original piers were modified for the original utility bridge. The south pier is now mostly collapsed. His feeling is that there would be very little we could do to satisfy SHPO, regardless of how much money was spent on the project, because it would be a recreation, not a restoration, which I am far from an expert on such things. But my understanding is that SHPO is okay with restoring historic structures, but they do not want to recreate a historic structure.
Yeah, because if that's ends up being the case, we might have some cost trade-offs that we would make, given that, if we don't think there's a reasonable chance that we could get that retaining our historical status, I'm thinking that there may be some cost trade-offs to bring the overall construction down.
Okay. Yeah, I will certainly make sure that we get that finding from SHPO.
It doesn't have to be the definitive, but it sounds like it's not likely. And if it's not likely, that's a pretty good thing to go on to say, let's not do a, inch by inch restoration of the southern pier, right? Or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I mean, there's a lot that is in this design that is just going to be a beautiful little bridge in a very key place. So I think, if there's anything, if we're not getting any kind of historic designation, I still think the aesthetics and the look of the bridge I hope we can keep them as similar as what we've already done, because it would look quite nice.
Yeah, I'm with you, Dan. It's like, take the piers, like if we could do something that's more the exterior look as opposed to the full restoration, and it reduces the cost by whatever, without altering that look, I think we should look at those, right? And that was always our trade-off, which is if we had a shot at retaining the historic designation, we should, look at what it would take. And if we don't, we can certainly keep the look, but, we could do, that's what I want to explore. I don't know the answer.
Okay. I like those trusses. I like those recreated trusses.
I know. All right, cool. Other comments?
Do we still have the funding from the state? Okay.
Yes, so the 500,000 that Assemblyman Skartatis gave us, or awarded us, I should say, yes, we still have that. And that's for construction.
Is there a timeline for the construction yet? Or is it, you know, we have to line all the funding up before the construction like how is it happening?
That was my question as well.
Okay.
Well, I think that's a conversation we should have, right? So part of it is if you're okay with one of the two proposals, right? So we'd have that conversation, and then we can get Tom started, and then that would lay out the construction, right? So once he continues, if he completes his work and gets whatever the necessary approvals, then we can back into a construction date. So depending how long that part would take, then we could get you to a timeline of when construction could start, and then we'd have to line it up by either looking for additional grants or build it into the capital plan. Tom, I don't know, just a ballpark for just for sake of conversation. So if we did everything to, let's just say, I guess out to construction documents, just what type of timeline are you looking at?
To get to construction documents,
which would get us to be able to bid. So
yeah, assuming a reasonable turnaround time on environmental permits and SHPO coordination, we could have those probably late May, early June for construction documents. We've so far we have this project set up as two construction projects. One would be the repair of the original truss and the fabrication of the replica trusses, because those are not structural elements. They can be fabricated by other steel fabricators that aren't necessarily qualified to make bridges, and that could also be done any time of year. Normally, by June, a lot of contractors have their work for 2021. Even now, towards the end of January, they're really kind of setting up all their projects for 2021. So I would say that construction on site would be for 2022 for the actual construction of the bridge on site.
So part of the, excuse me, so part of the conversation I can have with Chris is, and our grant writers, if and Chris has done a number of these projects, so he might know better, but if it's worth, certainly the council wants to move forward, so we move forward, and then you can have the documents, and if they're shovel ready, and depends on what type of grants are out there, and if anything's coming down from the federal government, that we may be able to access. So we can have those conversations with Chris moving forward on those.
Okay.
Anthony, just to add to that, they did put out the notifications for Bridge New York just today. I think the governor announced it. I'm not sure if that applies to pedestrian bridges though, unfortunately.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'll take a look at that.
So council okay moving forward?
Which option, Mayor, did you want to do? Sorry, we can have that conversation, design, or all the way to, I guess, just funding it to also with the construction management in there too.
Right. I would suggest that we leave it to a task for the administrator to sort out in the next week or so. And that's a punt from Anthony over to Chris. And you'll let us know which you prefer, but I'm comfortable either way. Chris may have a viewpoint. He's done a bunch of projects, so. Council, all right, moving forward, subject to a recommendation of the administrator as to, whether to do that a halfway or the whole way. Thank you all. Tom, I appreciate you hanging around. There's a few more people hanging around, so let's keep
All
going.
right. No problem. Thank you for having me.
Tom.
And if it's okay, I'll sign off now. Thank you.
Mia Nadasky and Lubach, you also been hanging around, so thank you.
We have.
This is on the what we call the bump out project, but officially accessibility improvements, pedestrian signal improvements. And again, here you know the routine, which is do it as quick as you can because you can go home.
Sure, absolutely. We're us included. So these are two federal projects that are pedestrian safety on Main Street, which is the bump out section, and then pedestrian signal improvements, which are the countdowns and the signal improvements on different intersections for pedestrians. So we're actually at the end of this process, and we're here now to discuss the award of the construction contract to the contractor. There was a bit of a long process. What happened there is we ended up bidding the project twice. We bid it once in the middle of the summer, and we got back what we thought were high bids and not a lot of bidders. We thought maybe that was because we bid it in the middle of the summer and the contractors were already busy and they weren't interested in bidding on a new project, and it was putting them up against the winter deadline. So we decided to rebid the project in the winter of 2020, January 2020, to have it ready for the new construction season. Unfortunately, apparently those bids were close to what everyone thought the project was worth, because it came back almost identical in dollar amount and the same number of bidders bid on the project. We reached out to them and we talked a bit about that it's kind of a specialty project, and there was the signal stuff intermixed with the highway stuff. So that was a little bit of kept people a little bit leery of it. But just in general, the economy of scale was not there. It wasn't a large sidewalk project. These are individual intersections with curb ADA accessibility, and it's more of a specialty, and you don't really get the economy of scale of doing a huge sidewalk project. So to that end, the funding was not at the level of what the low bid was. So the DOT has an option with the federal funding to reduce the scope to come within the federal funding, because anything above the federal funding is actually the responsibility of the city. And I don't think the city got into this project to fund over and above what the federal funding was. So we looked at it, we prioritized all the intersections we were doing the bump outs at, and then we covered all the intersections that would fit within the federal funding, including the pedestrian signals. Lou is prepared to go over what intersections those are if people are interested in having him review that. And then you can come back to me and we can talk about approving this award. And after the council looks at this and approves it, the DOT has already looked at it and approved it. You would go to the construction contract, and the contractor is Sunup Construction, and they would be starting this season on the construction, and they're ready to do that. So would someone like us to go through those, what the actual scope is?
Real quick?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay.
Real quick.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. All right, is that up? Everybody can see that?
Yep.
All right, great. So as Mia said, we prioritize the intersections. So starting at Cross Street, moving up to Willow. Next page here, we included Walnut Street, Cedar Street, Chestnut Street is highlighted here because that's actually included in the other project, the pedestrian signals project. Then moving on to Eliza Street, and then at Veterans Place. These intersections would include new curb, new ADA ramps, drainage improvements if needed, crosswalks. I can go through, if anybody has any questions at a particular one, I can go into more detail if needed.
Can you just remind us what the amount of the federal grant is? So doing that number of intersections is going to cost the federal government how much money?
So this is going to be,
Including, well, don't go over the pedestrian, the signals as well, because it's a full signal too.
yep. So for the Main Street project, the total amount funded for construction was $799,000.
I see what you mean about the quotes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's 80% covered by the federal government. So that breaks down to 639 from the feds and 160 from the city to cover their match.
Now go through the signal job then, the locations first.
Yeah, so here is what was originally 6 intersections. We took out a new signal at Walcott and Tyranda. However, Walcott and South is a whole new traffic signal with pedestrian signals. At the other intersections, it's limited to countdown timers and new push buttons. It was discussed at Walcott and Tyranda that that signal is fairly new. It does have pedestrian accommodations. So that one was the one that was taken out.
Right. When we made choices, we kind of all got together and kind of said, Walcott Tyranda already works. And then also when we were looking at bump outs, we said, you know, instead of every block, we kind of do closer to an every other as a way of kind of, you know, working it down. So I think we got the max value and, you know, kind of match up to what the funding available.
Yeah, I think we also maxed out the value because we took out some of the intersections that had more of the drainage impacts, which really drove up the price. So we basically are installing these, is it 5 to 6 intersections, Lou, 5 or 6 locations? And basically it's going to give everyone a taste of getting that safe crossing of Main Street where you have the bump out, you have a much shorter span to go across. People see you when you're standing on the side of the corner. And then once people start using them, maybe then they'll clamor for more, I guess is the hope. So right now what we're doing is we're at approval to award and to go forward. And since the contractor is already on board, you know, he's looking to get the contract in place so that he can go and do a lot of the shop drawing reviews and then also order a lot of the signal equipment, which has a lot of lead time, heavier lead time.
Do we have everything we need from the state?
Yes, you bet. Oh, and I should actually mention now that Anthony has been extremely helpful in getting this project from the very start all the way through to where we are today. So, you know, it's sad that he's leaving just at this point, but it sounds like he's going to be coming back at least for dinner sometime.
I'll have to come back and use them.
Yeah, and his t-shirt.
T-shirt.
But yes, we have all the approvals from New York State DOT to award the project. So basically we award and then you sign the contract. And when you sign the contract, the contractor can be in work. And we're actually going to we're the consultant that is on doing the construction inspection on the job. So we are also ready to start that process as well.
So the construction would begin in hopefully in the springtime?
Yeah, actually, I think that SunUp is looking to start, in March, April timeframe. There's going to be, MPT is a big piece of this to keep, you know, the street open while they're working and have access to the businesses. That's a little bit of our responsibility as a construction inspection firm, is to ensure that the businesses, we have communication with where the work is happening and what the access, and to, at the end of the day, make sure the access is established again. I think it's going to be a little bit challenging because once we open up the streets, it's always, the underground utilities are always a challenge on projects like this. We're not going that deep. We're only doing a little drainage, but it's going to be definitely a challenge when it's happening.
Yeah, because I guess I'm a little concerned not knowing when the pandemic is going to be ending and how much we depended on street dining this past season. I just wonder how we might anticipate problems like that.
Right, so that would be something that we would, it's really all the bump outs, all the work is really on the corners. So I think that it would be, have not much impact to the businesses if they're using the sidewalk in front of their locations, because it's all really concentrated on the curb and we're bumping out into the road. So we're like coming away from their businesses, but But that's going to be definitely part of the communication with our on-site inspection staff and the businesses, when we're going to be there, when the contractor's going to be there.
Yeah, I think knowing that it is concentrated to the corners, but these kind of crews have a tendency to spread a bit with vehicles and so on. And so if who's ever managing it, I think really takes this into consideration and during the whole process would be great.
Yes.
Sorry. What's the construction time frame? Meaning, how long do you think start to finish? Just so the council has a.
Lou, you have that. I think it's 3 months total
No, we had 9 months, Mia. I think it was.
for construction, but I don't think that they're going to be on Main Street. I mean, I think at a location, they're looking at weeks, at week, and where they're going to be setting up, excavating, prepping it for concrete, and then pouring. So, yeah, they're going to be moving along pretty. It's not going to be a huge impact along the way. They're not. We're not going to allow them, as the construction inspector, we have the responsibility to not allow them to, dig something up and then leave it and go somewhere else. That we have the ability to say, no, you have to, once you dig an area up, you have to then form it and pour it and move on to the next one. So yeah, but the plan would be to start, get him on board. And actually the next step would be to sign a contract with the contractor so that he can start doing some of these lead time traffic signal poles and things like that have a larger lead time.
Okay, everybody good?
And yeah, we have done some of these local projects also with Chris when he was at Ulster County. So I think it's going to be a fairly smooth transition for this type of project. So lucky for us. So that's all I have. I guess the vote goes on at the council meeting next week. Is that?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you all. You may go home.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mia. Thanks,
You're
Lou.
welcome. Thanks.
Thank you.
Wireless local law. Hopefully this is really short, right?
Is John still on?
Yes.
John, do you want to explain this or do you want me to run through it?
I think he took the lead on this.
No, Drew did actually, but I'll be happy to stand in. So this comes back to the council after the close of the public hearing last week. You recall there were a few comments, and in your packet is a revised local law in response to those comments. Apologize, I seem to have misplaced my page on. Let me pull it up on the screen. There were very minor comments. You had received comments from the planning board and the county that were all favorable. And this is ready for adoption if you're so inclined to do so. I'm just pulling up the changes. Okay, very few changes. If you go to pay as shown in the draft version in the packet, where it's in track changes on page 6 in section J, this was just some changes that were made because when John in our office reviewed the law with the intention, it was realized that actually the language we had wasn't specific enough. So we modified some language to provide that the setbacks for wireless telecommunication service facilities, except for small cell wireless facilities, in relation to the property line. And then, John, we have the language that except within the public right of way, all proposed poles, pole equipment, and enclosures installed in connection with the small cells facility shall comply with the minimum setback requirements of the zoning district in which it is located. And I think, Anthony, this relates to the proposed facility going on in Cross Street was sort of when we were applying that when we realized that the law didn't work as had been intended based upon the lease agreement that the city had approved. On page 7 under section I, visual mitigation, we found that this language was actually also repeated and contained in section 5 below on page 8. So it's duplicative language. So we removed it from section 5 and moved it up to section 1, including the language that says, or any adjacent residential uses in the area with respect to existing vegetation and screening. So minor modification there. And then the other changes are all ministerial, if you will, just some formatting changes that you see in the upper red line. So just those two substantive changes. I don't believe there's anything else that came out of the public comments. And of course, you had workshopped this on a number of occasions where we made revisions, substantial revisions to the local law based upon comments from the council members at the prior work sessions. John, is there anything else to add?
No, I just wanted to make the point that both of these changes cover the points that were made by the planning board in there, that there's a consideration of adjacent residential uses. We thought that was more specific language so that in the citing of something, you can consider how far it is from adjacent residential uses.
And then if the council is satisfied with this draft as prepared, you could vote on it on Monday. These are not significant changes that require recalling of a renoticing of a public hearing because they in fact arise out of a public hearing and comments that were received by you.
There was one bit of feedback that we got last week, or it could have been in a previous meeting. We were talking about having the small cell technology 20 feet off ground level. Right, we put that back in.
Yes, we did. I can't find it right now, but yes.
Right, so I think we put it back in, right?
Yeah, Drew said that she put it back in.
Yeah, I don't think it was 20 feet. I think it was 10 feet. Oh, here we go. Yep, the bottom of the antenna is at least 20 feet above the grade of the base of the pole. Page 7, number 1.
So then a question I thought came up was maybe the small cell technology is 20 feet off the ground, but is there other boxes and wires or equipment, or I don't know anything about this stuff, that we're saying could be at eye level? Meaning, if you put the white rectangle 20 feet up in the air, can you still put a bunch of your boxes and other equipment at eye level? And sorry, I don't have any technical knowledge, so you're going to have to stick with boxes and switches and levers and whatever I describe it as.
Fair enough. I do think there are boxes and switches, as you described it, that are accessory to the antenna. Yes.
And what is the regulation on those?
Yep, as to how those are regulated.
I'm just trying to keep ugly metal boxes out of people's line of sight on our beautiful Main Street. So I don't know if our language covers all that or not.
Yeah, I would have to get back to you, Dan, and the council. So I'll send you a separate email that addresses that. And then
I'm not trying to delay this thing. We're so close, but the question came up and I didn't know whether the law actually covered it or not. So it's a question.
Yep. So rather than look at it now, I will provide an answer and suggested language if it doesn't, and we can then quickly update the public before the council considers it at next Monday. If you want to workshop, of course, then just pull from the agenda. So what we'll do is we'll provide you with an answer, if necessary, proposed language, and have it placed on the agenda for consideration, and then you can remove it if it's not appropriate, if it's not ready. Does that make sense, Mayor?
Me.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Make sure we define boxes and
switches,
gizmos.
Widgets and gadgets.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Just we're on 416, 420. I apologize for the people that have had to wait. Thank you for your patience. What are we going to do here?
Good. Well, in the packet, we've provided the council with a draft resolution, and that resolution has a number of whereas clauses and goes through the standards set forth for the issuance of the special use permit, both the generalized standards and then the standards specific to the granting of the special use permit for the fourth floor. So it sets forth all those standards. And then it sets forth in the resolve clause, and I apologize, there are page numbers, but it's page 4.
Sorry, is it just me? It sounds like you're underwater.
Yep.
Yeah, I think I am sometimes. But so the resolution before the council sets forth, going through the criteria set forth in the city code pertaining to the issuance of a special use permit, both the general criteria and the special permit criteria for the fourth floor. And then we have the resolve section on page 4 that sets forth the conditions. Several of them are your boilerplate ones, no permits can be issued until the review fees are paid. Copy of a resolution shall be attached to the certificate of occupancy. We've included language about a rendering of the proposed project should be placed up on a board as you've requested for these larger projects, assuming you think that's appropriate. And then there are specific ones that are unique to this project. For example, number 6 states that any change to the layout or reduction in size of a public green space area shall require approval from the city council. And if approval is not obtained, then the permit would be deemed void to the extent it's modified. Also obtain approval from the city council if the planning board adopts any rule or condition affecting the public green space. And the concern there was responding to some of the council comments about making sure that this doesn't slip, if you will, during the planning review process. You understand there's going to be modifications made during the planning board, but you don't want it to get away from the intent of what you've adopted. I've also spoken with the applicant's counsel, Taylor Palmer, on this, and he's raised a couple of questions I want to review with him to make sure that we're not getting ourselves into issues down the road with it not being specific enough. So he and I are going to have a conversation, and if that results in any changes, we'll have a conversation with the council and provide you the outcome of that. We just want to make sure that this works. And one of those areas where I want to have that conversation is with respect to the use of the green space to make sure, for example, number 10, the public green space shall be used only for public purposes. No portion of the green space shall be used exclusively by the tenants. We just want to make sure and talk to his client about the actual practical everyday use and make sure that what they envision using versus our protecting the public park for public use meshes together so that it's not left for interpretation by the building department later on down the road. I think it's a good exercise to go through now and get those comments here. Number 7, any change to the square footage or location of the 4th story shall require approval from the city council, and that approval is not obtained, the special permit shall not be deemed void. Again, if for some reason the planning board and there's discussions that result in some change in the 4th story, you want it to come back to you because that's what you've approved with respect to the special use permit. Number 8 also came out of comments from the city council. Any change to the proposed building to reduce or eliminate the proposed commercial office space on the 2nd and 3rd floors shall require approval from the city council. If such approval is not obtained, the special permit shall be deemed void. Again, all of these are some of the reasons why you're granting the special permit, finding that the 4th floor is met because of these extra public benefits, if you will.
Nick, what does it mean to make the special use permit void? I mean, if they build the 4th floor and then, let's just say, another owner a few years from now is no longer in compliance with the special use permit, we're not exactly are we going to tell them to tear down their 4th floor, or how does
No, but the building inspector would put them on notice, give them opportunity to cure, and then the CO would be deemed revoked. And then so for example, if they stop using it for commercial space and get permission, they want to put in a restaurant on the 2nd floor, as an absurd example, that use would not have a certificate of occupancy, and then it could be ceased.
Got it. Thank you.
Yep, and provided them with notice and an opportunity to cure, but following all the correct procedures. But yes, there would be the ability to revoke that prior approval. Number 10, we read. Number 11, the applicant shall install signs to indicate the location of the public park. The sign shall be installed on Main Street and Schenck Avenue. At least one sign shall be installed in the proposed building facing Main Street, and the planning board shall approve the final location and design of the signs. And that was added in response to the comment about making sure that, it's interesting. You want this to look like a park, but how will the public know it's one that they can go into and that it's open to them? On the other hand, you don't want to have these obtrusive signs. So you've indicated you want some signs and where they should be and the intent, and you've left it to the planning board to determine what that should look like. 12, the city's use of the public space should not be limited by any building tenant. Again, we have public space with private uses backing onto and having access to it just as much as the public. We again want to make sure that this works. Number 13, the city in its sole discretion shall determine the hours and use of a public park and may adopt any other regulations for the public green space it deems appropriate. Again, making sure that this is a public park and the city can regulate its use.
Nick, I assume that the city takes no responsibility in terms of liability or maintenance or garbage and various other stuff in the park.
That is correct. And yeah,
That's
we
clear.
can add language to clarify that.
Yeah.
So are there any questions on the existing conditions proposed, and also if any questions on anything, and thank you, George, that we should add?
Yeah, since I worked with the planning board on the original site plan to be referred to the council, I'm obliged to say that I think that 6 it may be a problem. And either should be modified by saying something like after final site plan approval by the planning board, any changes to the layout. Because the layout that they've shown you to get to the number that they've said in the findings section, it can be argued that their layout violates a section of the city code. And it doesn't provide for as many spaces as the planning board requested in order to consider a waiver for the commercial parking. And it doesn't provide things like garbage cans for the restaurant or dumpsters or any of the other sorts of things. So if you don't meet that 4,000, whatever it is, square feet, then number 6 would force you to go back to the council again. And I just don't think it's probably good form to pass these people back and forth.
No, fair enough, but then how do you avoid the concern about the public green space being reduced to a level that is not consistent with the council's granting and it being in agreement with the plan?
Well, there might be some where it's larger than was originally proposed, but less than the number that they suggested in this revised site plan. I'm just saying that I can't anticipate, and I can't speak for the planning board members as to how they will vote, but that they won't come up with the same exact number of square feet of green space that the applicant showed in that conceptual site plan.
So is there a no less than X number of square feet that we could insert into this resolution?
Well, I had suggested two potential changes to put in at least in the findings section, so that flexibility as to how many parking spaces and how much green space square feet there were, and do it something much larger than was originally proposed to the planning board. Or like I said, in 6, started out by saying after final site plan approval by the planning board. So the planning board sets the size of the park, and thereafter the city council would have the right to say you can't lower that.
Well, but that means,
Sorry, I do personally find the size and the layout of the park to be important and are critical to me in supporting this special use permit.
But you still have to account for dumpsters and parking spaces and such.
but then why wasn't that included in the layout presented for the board for its consideration? To the
It
council?
was to the planning board, but it wasn't in the conceptual plan that shows a much larger.
Well, but so a much larger park was shown then that is missing some key elements that was presented to the planning board, but not the council. So I don't think the city council wants to not see garbage collection areas and the appropriate parking spaces. Is there a less than, I mean, are we talking 100 square feet? Are we talking 10%, 20%, 30% reduction? And did we lose John? Would the council have I mean, look, John raises a legitimate point about the garbage and parking. Is there a percentage threshold that the council would be comfortable with, or do you want me to work with John on that language and propose something to you?
I mean, I feel like I'm somewhat comfortable with a very small variance, but the layout, taking away the layout obligation concerns me because I do think that's an important part of what we reviewed with the applicants. I'm personally pleased with their plan, and I would not want to see elements of that go away. I don't know what other people think, though.
I agree with you, Amber.
Go ahead, Dan, sorry.
No, I mean, I'm just voicing agreement. I mean, the thing that kind of got me over the hump was the size of that garden in the back and what an attraction it will be because of its size.
Yeah, I think I would have felt misled if all of a sudden there's parking and garbage areas and other things going in there after the fact. So I would do whatever we can to keep it as very close to what was proposed to us as opposed to the planning board.
Here is saying is that we prefer the layout that the applicant has submitted, even though it has a couple of parking spaces on North Street, right? Because what it does is it offers up a couple of spaces on Shank and it increases the size of that park. Maybe we should just say that to the planning board. All right, because it's what the applicant proposed and it's us that's saying, well, maybe the planning board would flip those parking places to the back, move this to the back, and it's actually going against what you all seem to say you prefer. If that's what we prefer, we should just tell them that too.
That's what I prefer.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate the concern, and it is inefficient to have somebody have to go back and forth to the boards multiple times. But yeah, it sounds like we're saying the layout is a very important aspect of this, as is the size.
So then,
Yeah, I just want to agree. I mean, that was really, I think, the reason that most of us were so excited about this project. And if you take that away, it kind of becomes a bait and switch. So that's huge. That's huge to this process.
Why don't we do the proposal that they made saying that, you know, if the planning board wishes to change the parking arrangement and substantially reduces the size of it, it has to come back to us. But that we actually prefer this layout, if that's what you all are saying.
I mean, I think it is, yeah.
Yep.
That's definitely what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So I understand John's concerns, but because it maximizes the size of the space, it's a pretty reasonable trade-off.
So then, similar to the earlier discussion about the traffic safety committee, I think we need to convey then to the planning board, either in this resolution or in a separate document, your thinking behind that so they understand it and can appreciate it.
Yep.
So we'll work on that.
Any concerns go in that direction? Okay. Any concerns from the applicant, or we just approved your layout, I think.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Yes, thank you again. We did have a conversation with the city attorney, and we appreciate the communications from the city administrator and wish him well, of course, in his future endeavors. We are in agreement with Mr. Ward Willis with respect to those particular comments, clarifications, and we will be providing some updated details requested by his office so as to clarify certain items that weren't as clear as they could be. So we look forward to seeing you all next week and again discussing and confirming with the city attorney those details.
So Mayor, the intent is to work with Anthony and John and Chris on the language discussed tonight. We're going to speak with the applicant and sort of fine tune some of this language, and then we'll send you a track changes version. Have it ready for your consideration on Monday if we think it's there. If not, we're going to bring it back for a workshop. But I think given the direction, the intent is to get this ready so you can vote on it. But if not, we'll workshop it.
Okay. And then I will make a final comment here, and I'll say it again in council. Our decision is whether to permit this site plan, this conceptual plan for special use permit with that fourth floor in lieu of a 3-story structure across the entire lot, right? Because that's what by right they're able to do. And this is a no-brainer to me. And I will say it again at council meeting next week. I actually think this is a mark of success of our law regarding fourth floors that we put in place. All right. Oh my gosh, we're done. Except for executive session. Thank you. Good.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week.
Yep. We have 2 items for executive session. We don't need a motion. Do we need a motion to go to executive session?
We need a motion and stating the reason why, which I believe is personnel and advice of counsel.
You just said,
Motion to adjourn to executive session for personnel and advice of counsel
Second,
And contract and real estate.
and contract and real estate.
that too.
And we have a separate Zoom invite?
Yes, we do. So Colin resent it again. It's at the top of everybody's inbox.
it was an aye. I saw no nays. See you in a minute. Thank you all.
Thanks, night, everybody.